Right, hello everyone. Oh, sorry, get on the screen too soon. Tonight we're going to talk about Dennis Hopper, and the reason I wanted to talk about Dennis Hopper and his film, The Last Movie, because you might think, what does that have to do with the Manson case? Well, obviously, over the past few weeks, I've been talking about the rumours about the Cielo Drive murders and that there was some kind of pornography there, and there's always been this story about a drug dealer getting raped there, and that, hasn't there? The Billy Doyle incident. And Dennis Hopper was, in fact, one of the first people to talk about this incident in an interview. And for years, none of us could find the actual newspaper interview. And we finally found it a couple of weeks ago. And basically, straight away noticed it's written by Lawrence Schiller. Now, Lawrence Schiller wrote The Killing of Sharon Tate, which is the book that was written from interviews with Susan during the trial and before the trial. And so it's a very controversial book. And he now denies even writing it on his website. He doesn't talk about it or anything. But yeah, he's the guy that wrote The Killing of Sharon Tate. So I thought, what the hell? And it turns out Lawrence Schiller made a documentary about Dennis Hopper that's called An American Dreamer, and that is on YouTube. And if you're into Reeve Whitson, you've probably heard of this documentary because people thought Reeve Whitson was in it, because at one point there is a man that really looks like Reeve Whitson, but it's not him. It's been debunked that is Reeve Whitson. But that film, called An American Dreamer, was made by Lawrence Schiller, who's the guy who wrote The Killing of Sharon Tate, which I just thought was crazy. So I thought, what a rabbit hole. And so I went and looked into this movie. I'm going to read you out a couple of articles about it, basically. And yeah, I'll just have a break for a second, mate. Talk to the audience. This is a live stream. I will put I will put the links to these articles in the description as well. And there'll be chapters if you want to get straight to where I start reading the articles. Yeah, I think I made it clear everything I had to say there. Did everyone get that? It's quite confusing, yes, right. But basically, yeah, because Dennis Hopper is the source for this rumour about the Doyle incident, and we finally found the interview, and I was amazed to see that it was written by Lawrence Schiller. And when I looked into it, Lawrence Schiller wasn't only a writer, he made films and he's a photographer as well. We actually found his website. And he's written quite a few books, but he doesn't mention The Killing of Sharon Tate on his website. He doesn't want to talk about it, yeah. So, yeah, that's it. Schiller turns up. So I was like, what the hell? Yeah. Yeah. It's like basically, so yeah. 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 You'd think Schiller wouldn't have appreciated Hopper's revelation about the porn in the Doyle interview, uplifting the veil for a short view, yeah, whatever. But well, it's also maybe Lawrence should have felt guilty because he knew that he had helped create the cover-up, because the story that Susan told is what became the cover-up, isn't it? What she said at the grand jury and that became the story everyone believes. Everyone just believes that unquestioningly, don't they? It's like you have to convince people like that actually there's something wrong and Jay's blood was outside and there's a lot of stuff outside and that story that Susan told wasn't true, sort of thing. So maybe Schiller didn't like the fact he was involved in covering everything up and he wanted to try and help expose stuff, basically. Who knows? Yeah. That's it. Or a diversion because Doyle supposedly wasn't involved. Yeah, well, that's it. As well, it does seem like so crazy, doesn't it, that this happens to these people? I mean, what Dennis Hopper says in that interview, I've now actually transcribed it. It's in my Facebook group and on the subreddit. If you couldn't read the photo of the interview that we found, because it is really difficult to read, I managed to get it transcribed so you can read it properly. And he talks about, Manson and that. And Lawrence Schiller was also friends with Caruso, the other lawyer of Susan's that you don't see in court. You only see Caballero. But Caruso was apparently also Susan's lawyer. And he was, involved with Harrigan as well, Tom Harrigan. He was Tom Harrigan's lawyer. So, yeah, the connections are crazy. Like I said, I just couldn't believe it. And Lawrence Schiller not only published this interview, probably to promote the documentary film he'd made about Dennis Hopper. And a lot of what he says in that interview is actually in the film as well, if you watch the film. It is entertaining. It's worth watching. I liked it anyway, yeah. Sorry, I don't know what you're saying, Stuart. Yeah, Caballero was no sentence man either. He physically ripped into tiny pieces a section of Sadie's taped interview in which she admitted to lying to the grand jury at his direction, yeah. And in the penalty phases, I've read out a lot of what she said at the penalty phase because it's so crazy as well. And like, who can believe her anyway? Who knows what to believe from that woman's mouth, you know? But She's saying all sorts about the shit they were saying to her and the stuff they were promising her. Caballero told her she could be out in 7 years and get her son back and shit like that. You know, it's like, it's crazy that if she they said if she testified at the grand jury, she'd be able to get out and they'd give her son back and stuff like that. Stuff they had no business saying to her just to get her to tell this story. And these people all worked for the mob, didn't they? They were hired just to cement in this story to cover up the pornography rumors and all that, basically, wasn't it? You know, to have a different story told, to cover up all the connections to drugs and illicit pornography and all that sort of stuff. It's horrible. Yeah, that's it. And Caruso represented, the LA Times against Charles Tackett. I've done a streamer. I read out the entire chapter that Nicholas Stroke wrote about it in the Manson file, because he goes, into great detail about all of it. Explains it all to you. Yeah. Loads of it. Yeah, he did. He didn't say my channel name, though. He only said my name. So, no one would, people would find it looking for my name, would they? He should have said of True Crime and Moonshine. But no, I thank him for saying that, at least, anyway, yeah. He does, yeah. Well, I did find out, yeah. He credits me. Well, I credit him enough, don't I? Yeah. Yeah, that's it, Schiller. And if you're looking at his website as well, he's written books about Patty Hearst, about JFK. He's in everything. I didn't realize he was such a prolific photographer as well. His website's full of all the photographs he took. There's photos of like Marilyn Monroe and everything. He was all over Hollywood. And that film he made with Dennis Hopper, An American Dreamer, that just descends into softcore porn at the end. Totally, it's quite. It is a strange film. Very interesting. It's an interesting film though. But experimental cinema. I liked it. I thought it was entertaining. I don't know, but it does. Yeah, but that's obviously what they were going for with that. And apparently, this was at a time as well in Hollywood when they were trying to make porn more acceptable, and they were trying to get pornography into mainstream films. But they realised it was never going to work, so they just made porn its own industry, didn't they? Basically, yeah. After it became legal. Yeah. But yeah, I want to start, reading out the stuff about the film, An American. Sorry, what is the film called? No, the film is called The Last Movie. Sorry, the documentary by Lawrence Schiller is called An American Dreamer. That's a documentary about Dennis Hopper, and the film he made was called The Last Movie. But there was something crazy I read straight away. Like I say, when we get to it, just like when you read about the Manson case and you see like these weird connections that don't mean anything, but it's just like weird stuff. It's like something's messing with you. You'll know what I mean if you've read a lot about the Manson case. You see these weird connections. Don't actually mean anything. But yeah, I'll start reading this article out now anyway. Going like that. There we go. Henry Fonda wasn't holding back, not even a little. It was October 1970, and the 65-year-old Hollywood legend had recently watched his son Peter on the David Frost show. Peter wasn't the problem. Fonda's son had come out, shaken Frost's hand, and taken his seat, like a goddamn normal person. No, the thing raising Fonda's blood pressure was what happened next, when Peter's friend Dennis Hopper came on stage. Dennis came out floating, Fonda later told a New York Times reporter. He demonstrated what he meant by flouncing about the living room in his Manhattan apartment with arms spread wide and head tossed backwards. And every time Frost asked him a question, he began giggling. Dennis is stoned out of his mind. He'd have to act that way. Put that in your story, Fonda told the reporter. This is not off the record. Dennis Hopper is an idiot. Spell that name right. And he spells out Dennis Hopper. Reached at his home in Taos, New Mexico, Hopper laughed when told about Fonda's rant. Henry Fonda said I was an idiot, Hopper said. Well, I guess it goes to show you what the establishment view of me is. Hopper couldn't afford to be amused. Hopper could afford to be amused, right? After years of being regarded by much of the old guard as an ill-mannered, drug-addled lunatic, he was now possibly the hottest filmmaker in Hollywood. Easy Rider, which Hopper had made for less than $500,000, was the surprise smash of 1969, grossing $60 million, and seemingly striking a death blow to the studio system that nourished the elder Fonda. Hopper's overnight transformation from unemployable fuck-up to Wellesian genius was made exponentially more aggravating when Universal gave him total control over his next picture, on which he was currently in post-production, The Last Movie, which Hopper wrote, directed, starred in, and edited. He declared it the first American art film. Hopper was keenly aware that the project would determine the course of his future, as he told the endless stream of reporters who visited him on the film's set. "The last movie is the big one," he told one writer. "If I foul up now, they'll say Easy Rider was a fluke, but I've got to take chances to do what I want." And true to his word, that's exactly what he did. Hollywood, 1965 to 1969. The idea for the last movie came to Hopper in 1965 at a wrap party for the John Wayne film The Sons of Katie Elder in Durango, Mexico, a popular location for Hollywood westerns. Katie Elder was Hopper's first Hollywood movie since the 1958 western From Hell to Texas, also directed by Henry Hathaway, who had effectively blacklisted the actor after his method approach slowed down production. Things came to a head one night when Hopper turned the set into his own personal actor's studio, trying every possible approach other than Hathaway's for 85 takes, before bursting into tears of frustration and begging the director to give him his line readings one last time. When they were done, Hathaway threw an arm around Hopper and said, "Kid, you'll never work in this town again." For the next 6 years, Hopper didn't appear in a single Hollywood film and struggled to find work even in television. But in late 1964, Hathaway and Wayne decided that the 28-year-old actor, who was then married to Brooke Haywood, the scion of a prominent Hollywood family, and had a young daughter to support, had suffered enough. On his best behaviour through the Katie Elder shoot, Hopper became best friends with 22-year-old actor Michael Anderson Jr. "We were the only two people under 100, Anderson said. When the film wrapped, Hopper and Anderson attended a party thrown by a stuntman who'd entered a house in Durango. They spent the evening smoking pot and staring into an outdoor fireplace in relative silence, until Hopper turned to Anderson and said, "Hey man, I just had the best idea for a movie. It's about making movies and the effect it has on people and what they do when the movie company leaves town." Hopper teamed up with screenwriter Stuart Stern. Stern's personal papers, containing everything from his high school academic records, correspondence with Joan Crawford and Paul Newman, and scripts for pictures like Rebel Without a Cause, his best-known movie, and Hopper's film acting debut, make up 22 boxes located in a special collections library at the University of Iowa. For years, only one of those boxes was unavailable for public view, Box 22, which contained the materials for the last movie, and was placed under seal until after both Hopper and Stern were dead. Its contents tell a portion of the story of Stern's collaboration with Hopper, which began when Hopper returned to Los Angeles and settled at Stern's house to write a treatment for what they were calling the last movie, or Boohoo in Tinseltown. "Dennis would stride back and forth in the room, and we'd spitball ideas," Stern said. "I sat at the typewriter, and he'd walk behind me with his joint, and he'd be raving. 'I bet you could really write if you had a little joint,' I said. Well, I just won't do it. It makes me hallucinate." So he said, "There's something called a bong. You just inhale it over water." As Hopper blew smoke down the snorkel of Stern's scuba mask, the pair wrote a 98-page outline for the story of a broken-down stuntman named Tex. Right, so the original character, he was originally named Tex. They changed his name by the time the film was made, but that just blew my mind when I read that. The stuntman named Tex, who shacks up with an indigenous girl and stays behind in a small Latin American town, where a western had just wrapped. After watching the film company shoot their western, the natives began to reenact its making as a religious ritual, using the old sets, as well as cameras and other equipment they've made out of sticks. Tex, meanwhile, plans to seek his fortune by developing the town as a location for future productions. "He's Mr. Middle America," Hopper said. "He dreams of big cars, swimming pools, gorgeous girls. He's so innocent, and he doesn't realize he's living out a myth, nailing himself to a cross of gold." The natives, however, do understand and create a passion play of greed and violence, using Tex as the doomed Christ figure in their deadly ceremony. "The end," Hopper said, "is far out." Stern's notes from 1965 also include a list of actors who could play Tex, including Lee Marvin, Andy Griffith, Sterling Hayden, William Holden, and their first choice, Montgomery Clift. Henry Hathaway and Dominic Dunn were jotted down as potential producers, but the first person attached to the project, albeit briefly, was Richard Rush, who later produced and directed The Stuntman. Rush agreed to produce, but privately wrote to Stern, expressing his concerns about Hopper. "The first problem we have to deal with is your involvement and Dennis's authoritarianism." "Hey man, I just had the best idea for a movie. It's about making movies and the effect it has on people and what they do when a movie company leaves town." By the spring of 1966, Rush was no longer involved, and the project was now in the unlikely hands of 26-year-old music impresario Phil Spector. What? Yeah, who considered Hopper to be an American truffant and was considering making the last movie's first foray into film. Spector was a terrifying man, extremely wrapped up in himself, according to Stern, with Spector promising to back the film and carry the film to Cannes under his arm if necessary. Hopper and Stern wrote a 119-page screenplay in 3 days and seemed ready to move forward until Montgomery Clift died that July at the age of 45. With Spector's money behind them, Jason Robards agreed to play Tex, leading a cast that included Jane Fonda, Jennifer Jones, and Joseph Cotton. The film would be shot in Mexico by Haskell Wexler with a start date of October the 15th, 1966. Then things got weird. Dennis wants me to waive all creative control, Stern wrote. Hopper called him, claiming that Spector was threatening to pull out of the project if Stern didn't reduce his stake in the profits. I could tell he was phoning me from Phil Spector's house, Stern wrote, because I could hear the minor bird in the background. The ill-fated partnership with Spector ended with depositions for what would have been a great lawsuit. 3 years later, emboldened by Easy Rider's success, Hopper pitched the last movie to BBS, the production company founded by Bert Schneider, Bob Rafelson, and Stuart Blauner that had backed Easy Rider. Schneider and Rafelson had no interest. Dennis began to believe his own myth, Rafelson says, while Blauner was intrigued. That is until Hopper, then 33, explained that he would play the broken-down middle-aged stuntman, now named Kansas after Hopper's home state, himself. BBS passed, and the last movie wound up at Universal, which had established a young directors unit that sought to mimic BBS's low-budget, high-return approach. Desperate to capture the youth market, Universal gave Hopper a final cut so long as he bought into the project under the budget of $85,000 to $1 million. Hopper agreed to work for $500 a week on the condition that he would receive 50% of the profits when his new film, which seemed sure to be a hit. All right, so Peru, winter of 1970. For the first 2 weeks of production, Hopper's plan was to shoot the film within a film in Chinchero, Peru, 2.5 miles above sea level and frequently above the clouds. Surrounded by the snow-capped Andes, the village looked down upon valleys of lush, radiant green, dusted with areas of golden yellow. In January, Hopper was joined by the cast of the fake Western, hard-living friends like Dean Stockwell, Russ Tamblyn, Peter Fonda, and Robert Mitchum's son, Jim. That group, along with Henry Jaglom and Tony Basil, gathered at LAX to take a chartered flight down to Peru. As flight time neared, some of the actors began to wonder about John Barrymore Jr., scion of the legendary acting family and father of Drew, who had yet to show up to the airport. They later learned he and Jim Morrison of The Doors had been unexpectedly detained in Arizona. They'd gotten into trouble the night before at their hotel in Tucson, where they were crawling around on all fours, barking like dogs, according to Jim Mitchum. Then they got to the airport. When they got to the airport, they were carrying on, and when they got on the plane to LA, one of them made a crack about a bomb, which didn't go over too well. Back at LAX, the plane took off, bound for Cuzco, with layover in Lima. 10 minutes in the air, and the cabin is a fog of marijuana smoke, Juglum wrote in his diary. As they got closer to Lima, someone began trying to get the stewardesses high with them, which resulted in a call to air traffic control, who were ready to arrest everyone on board as soon as they touched down. Getting wind of this, one of Hopper's producers phoned the head of the airline and arranged for them to elude the police by deplaning and boarding their flight to Cuzco directly from the tarmac. An international flight. I expected people to be cool. Hopper later told a reporter, "I carry nothing across international borders. I'm paranoid enough without making that scene." Hopper held an initial wardrobe meeting at the old Victorian Hotel where most of the cast was staying. Everyone pounded Pisco Sours, the powerful national drink made from high-proof Peruvian brandy, and tried on their Western gear. At 12,400 feet above sea level, Sylvia Miles, who handed her bags to a Peruvian general upon arriving at the hotel, got up to go to the bathroom and passed out from altitude sickness. She was not alone, as pretty much everyone wound up battling it at one point or another. I watched cinematographer Laszlo Kovacs walk up a little grade in the village, says stunt coordinator Chuck Bale, and when he got there, he fell flat on his face. He didn't even put his hands out in front of him. 10 minutes in the air in the cabin with a fog of marijuana smoke. While it's hard to make a movie, and even harder to make it at such high altitude, the difficulties are compounded even further when there are people following your every move. A group of mostly worshipful reporters from the New York Times, Life, Look, Rolling Stone, and Esquire came and went throughout the shoot. The most critical of those writers was Brad Darrach of Life, who described the first few days on set as follows. Somebody made a cocaine connection, and a number of actors laid in a large supply at bargain basement prices. By 10 p.m., almost 30 members of the company were sniffing coke or had turned on with grass, acid, or speed. By midnight, much of the cast had drifted off to bed by twos and threes. At 2 a.m., I was wakened by screams. A young actress had taken LSD and was having a bummer. At 3 a.m., I heard a rapping on the window beside my bed. A young woman I hadn't met was standing on a wide ledge that ran along the side of the hotel below the windowsill. It was raining, and her nightgown was drenched. "Do you mind if I come in?" she said vaguely. According to Derek's account, one actor almost died after eating 5 peyote buds at the same time. There were whipping parties, and a woman who was said to look like Joan of Arc was tied up with a fire burning at her feet. 2 actors disappeared for several days each. One, Billy Gray, after trying to climb down Machu Picchu, and the other, Rod Cameron, after falling off the wagon when Jim Mitchum bought him a drink. It was, as Michael Anderson says, a Dennis Hopper production. Despite the initial drug-fueled mania, the shoot was a smooth one. Everybody on set loved Hopper and believed in what he was doing. The cast and crew worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and those who took acid only did so on Sundays out of respect for their director. "He's a genius," one crew member said. "He feels deeper than other men. I'm not queer, but I swear I love this guy. I almost love him physically." Hopper almost seemed to have a strong understanding of how to handle performers and generally treated them in a friendly manner, calling everyone, even the actresses, man. "Working with Dennis was invigorating and fulfilling," said actress Julie Adams, who had played the sultry wife of an American businessman in the film. "He gave me more artistic freedom than I'd ever had in front of the camera before." Some of it was simply instinct for Hopper, who was a photographer and had done work for national magazines and had amassed what would become a multi-million-dollar art collection. "He kind of made up the stuff as he went along," Bale says. "He and Laszlo worked together so well because they worked together. Dennis would just stop and turn and say the sun is in perfect position, and they'd open the doors and shoot something else." Surrounded by more incredible imagery than he'd ever imagined, Hopper ran wild with the talented DP Laszlo Kovacs by his side, capturing the most beautiful footage he may have ever gotten on film and adding layers upon layers of visual meaning to the last movie, following the general outline of the script but improvising all the dialogue and scenes within it. "I'm not afraid to start work with an empty head," he told a reporter. If you can't create in the moment, you're not creating." The cast and crew followed Hopper's lead and went with what he described as the moment-to-moment reality that presented itself to them each day. Knew what he was doing, even when he didn't know what he was doing, according to actor Don Gordon. First man, I want to make the audience believe. I want to build a reality for them," Hopper explained to one reporter. "Then towards the end, I start breaking down that reality so that it deals with the nature of reality." Hopper's multi-level reality involved filling the actual Cincinnati village square with sets that approximated an old western town, including a jail, hotel, saloon, and a church run by a priest who was killed during the climactic religious ceremony. After the shoot, the villagers asked Hopper and Lewis to leave the sets behind to be used as a tourism attraction. Hopper declined the request and told them to use the construction materials to build a school. "Suddenly you're 33 in Peru with a gang of guys who are living up to their reputations," Chris Christopherson, a then unknown singer who had been cast in a small role, later reflected, like his character Kansas. Hopper was sleeping with local women. He did what he was filming, Christopherson said. He was filming the corruption of a little town by the movie people. And I mean, they ruined this town. I think he got a priest defrocked. A simple idea that had sprung from a night by the fire in Durango had now become a kind of picture that nobody on the set, including Hopper, could describe in a few sentences, much less a couple of paragraphs, or even an entire script. Taos, spring 1970 to spring 1971. Hopper used some of his Easy Rider money to purchase a sprawling estate in Taos, New Mexico, that included a 22-room adobe house, once owned by Mabel Lynn Dodge, a self-styled Southwestern Gertrude Steen. The Mud Palace, as the house was called, had been a commune and spiritual oasis for artists like Georgia O'Keeffe, Aldous Huxley, and D.H. Lawrence, who painted the windows in one of the bathrooms. Keeping the original furniture and Lawrence's windows, Hopper covered the walls with recent works by Warhol, Ed Ruscha, including his famous Standard Station, Jackson Pollock, and the experimental artist Bruce Conner. a close friend, who, along with an ever-rotating cast of artists, musicians, filmmakers, journalists, and groupies, known as dinglings, lived in the house with the editors, who'd been hired to help turn more than 40 hours of footage into a 2-hour movie. Hopper began editing in the late spring 1970, planning to spend an entire year searching for his story, which he was convinced would be a masterpiece. And it was in Taos, Michael Groskoff says, that the big problems began. Now divorced from Haywood, Hopper became engaged to singer Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and Papas, whom he'd also cast in the last movie. Roughly 5 months into editing, Hopper married Phillips on October 31st, 1970, before a small group of guests who gathered at his home in Taos, which Hopper had decorated with hundreds of candles stuck in paper bags. He told everyone to wear white chiffon, says Michael Anderson. 2 people caught on fire. The marriage didn't fare much better. Described by singer John Phillips, Michelle's ex, as the 6 Days War, it actually lasted for 8, which Hopper allegedly spent screaming that his new wife was a witch, shooting guns in the house, and handcuffing her to the bed in an attempt to keep her from escaping, which she did nonetheless, waking up one morning to find his wife gone. Hopper jumped in his car and chased Phillips to the airport, when he drove onto the runway and tried to stop her plane. Speaking on the phone a few days later, Hopper told Michelle, "I love you, I need you," to which she responded, "Have you thought of suicide?" He was Dennis Hopper, being Dennis Hopper, even when he was stoned out of his mind. Dennis drank occasionally, meaning like all the time, says Todd Colombo, one of Hopper's editors. He drank enough to kill me. Notwithstanding the joint seemingly affixed to his hand and his proclivity for downing peyote buttons with a can of Coors, Hopper was able to function at a high level when necessary and worked incredibly hard when he was in the editing room, albeit at odd hours, one advantage of having your editors live with you. I came in one time, and he was on his butt on the floor of the editing room, just gone, recalls his assistant Diana Schwab. He looked at me and stood up. He was perfectly in control. He was Dennis Hopper being Dennis Hopper, even when he was stoned out of his mind. He was a consummate actor. And he was doing that for a documentary crew led by L.M. Kit Carson and Lawrence Schiller that had descended upon Taos to make American Dreamer, a film about the post-production of the last movie. He was living the life of his character out of Easy Rider, Schiller said of Hopper, who was stoned all the time, carrying around an AK-47. Actor Dean Stockwell recalls that Dennis was fond of guns at the time. Once in a while, he'd go up on the roof and fire off a couple of rounds into the sky. I remember 2 or 3 times inside the house, he'd take a revolver and shoot it at the ceiling. Perhaps the most notable of these incidents occurred in February 1971, when Hopper had just spent 52 straight hours in the editing room, cutting the film down in order to show it to Cannes founder and president Favre Labret and several of his colleagues in anticipation of showing the last movie at their festival. Not long before Hopper's editors had either left or been fired after allegedly becoming involved in a Mud Palace love triangle and producing a semi-final cut of the film that wasn't in accord with the director's visions. Bringing on Columbo and Roll Morrow to help him edit, Hopper screened 40 hours of footage at the El Cortez Theatre he purchased on the outskirts of Taos for this very purpose, then dissecting it scene by scene in the little editing studio at Hopper's house, then did it again and again, getting down to 5 hours, then 4, and finally 2, all the while trying to find a workable narrative that wouldn't destroy Kovac's imagery. Satisfied, they showed a rough version to the group from Cannes, who seemed fairly indifferent to the results. After the screening, everyone had drinks in the kitchen at the Mud Palace, where Labret and his friends began speaking to each other in French. Hopper, sitting by himself, pulled out his gun and put a bullet through the ceiling, apparently missing his brother David, who, unknown to Hopper, was directly upstairs by only a few inches. He got everybody's attention, Columbo recalls. There were a number of things like that, to get the attention back to where it belongs. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, Universal boss Lou Wasserman was putting enormous pressure on Danny Selznick and Ned Tannen, the 2 executives in charge of the Young Directors program who were responsible for managing the last movie. Over the course of Hopper's time in Taos, the studio had done everything they could to keep an eye on him, at one point calling Jim Mitchum to find out what was going on. Mitchum's assessment, he was out of control in Taos, things were crazy. Gruskoff, now working for Universal, offered to go down, feeling responsible because he'd been the one who negotiated the final cut for Hopper in the first place. Immensely fond of Hopper, Gruskoff tried to discuss the commerciality of the project with his friend and encouraged him to simply finish the film and move on to his next project. but quickly realised that he wasn't getting anywhere. He was just getting stranger and stranger, Grushkov says, in his trips to Taos. It was his movie, and it was his mind. He knew better than I did. Tannen and Selznick tried to keep tabs on the film by phone, but they were hamstrung by the fact that Hopper had final cut and was doing whatever he wanted, which included instructing his editors to tell Selznick and Eldridge Cleaver and the Black Panthers had raided the editing room and stolen the film. Eventually, Tannen flew to Taos, arrived by limo at the Mud Palace, where he found an orgy in full swing and was immediately confronted by Lawrence Schiller, who stuck a camera in his face. Please don't do that, the famously hot-tempered studio exec told Schiller, who continued filming. Trying to remain polite, he repeated his request, but Schiller didn't budge, at which point Tannen tore the camera out of his hands and threw it out the window, screaming, "You fuck! I'll kill you, you fucker!" Watching all of this, Hopper asked for a camera so he could keep shooting, as the orgy continued in the background. Hopper wasn't opposed to outsiders offering artistic advice for his film. Nicholas Ray, who directed Hopper in Rebel Without a Cause, had fallen on hard times and had been living at the Mud Palace, where he was running up the phone bill and encouraging Hopper to take more and more risks as he cut the film. When the phone bill hit somewhere around $30,000, Hopper found Ray a teaching job on the East Coast just to get him out of the house. The most controversial artistic influence on the last movie, however, was Alejandro Jodorowsky, the director of the acid western El Topo, who was one of the very few people around Hopper who neither smoked nor drank. Jodorowsky's role in editing the last movie has long been the subject of debate. Some claim that the Chilean filmmaker watched a nearly complete version of the film and told Dennis it was nothing more than a conventional Hollywood movie, encouraging him to strip the narrative and put it back together like a Cubist painting. Lawrence Schiller claims Jodorowsky destroyed the film. Jodorowsky, however, claims the opposite. In his version of the story, Hopper's film was a mess when he arrived in Taos, and Jodorowsky spent several days re-editing the entire picture, giving it a clear narrative line and bringing the story to a deeply moving conclusion. The difference between his cut and Hopper's, Jodorowsky explained to me via email, was the difference between the vision of an artist who takes drugs all day and the vision of an artist who searches a profound truth in abstinence. It has been suggested that Jodorowsky's version still exists somewhere, though it has never been found. Hollywood, summer 1971. In June, Hopper and his editors loaded the film onto a flatbed truck bound for Hollywood, where they would do the final post-production work and get it ready for release. Despite the chaos of the prior year, Hopper had made progress with the film's edit. The film got better and more cohesive and shorter, Roll Murray said. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Late one night, however, when the team was working in a Los Angeles editing room on what was nearly the final cut, Hopper, who'd been out with his friends, burst in and excitedly told them about the new idea. "I've had a vision," he told them. Take about the last 10 minutes and put it on the beginning of the movie and then go into the opening credits." What had been a challenging movie to begin with and had become more challenging as it went through innumerable iterations in which Hopper struggled to find the core of his story and meld it with his beautifully composed cinematography, had become something akin to a piece of abstract art. The result, according to Murrow, was hard for people to see. The executives from Universal gathered in a dignified, elegant executive screening room, decorated like a European drawing room, with a retractable oil painting in front of the screen to watch the last movie. They sat in total silence for the duration of the film. Not a single word was said, according to producer Paul Lewis. When it was over, a projectionist was overheard telling someone that the movie was aptly titled, since it was undoubtedly the last movie Hopper was ever going to be allowed to make. MCA founder Jules Steen, who had enormous affection for Hopper and had encouraged Lew Wasserman to work with him, stood up, wiped his glasses, and said, "I'll never understand this younger generation." Wasserman, meanwhile, was enraged and insisted that the movie be recut. Hopper refused. The Universal head said he simply wouldn't release the picture, but this was an empty threat, since he was contractually obligated to open and promote it in New York and Los Angeles at theatres selected by Hopper's representatives. The studio planned to do the bare minimum that was required of them. Hopper decided to promote the film on his own. He took it to the Venice Film Festival, where it won the Critics' Prize, but did little to improve his standing with Wasserman, Universal, or its distributors. "It's a test for me and it's a test for the audience, to see if there's an audience out there," Hopper said. "I think people will have to see it twice before they understand it. That's a strange thing to ask people to do." When it opened at New York's RKO Theatre that September, the last movie broke the theatre's single-day ticket sale record. before dropping off precipitously and being withdrawn after 2 weeks. Savaged by critics, seen by almost no one, and completely unsupported by the studio, the last movie limped into Los Angeles for its premiere at the end of October 1971. 2 days later, Hopper appeared on The Merv Griffin Show, where he sauntered on stage in a denim ensemble with a droopy moustache and bandana. Seemingly stoned, he joined an unlikely panel that included James Brolin and Willie Mays. Griffin congratulated Hopper on being a big filmmaker. I was a big filmmaker, Hopper responded. Have you hit bottom? Griffin asked kiddingly. No, Hopper said despondently. I've hit the top. Indeed he had, and it was no place for an artist. Right. Yes, and it is. I'd seen that it hadn't been released on DVD, but when I was searching for a thumbnail for this, I think it has actually now been released on DVD because I want to see it after everything I've read about it. That sounds crazy, and it's a significant piece of cinema because it was the next film he did after Easy Rider. But yeah, what about that story? That's just crazy, isn't it? And the box with all the scripts was held until the director and Dennis Hopper were dead. The other guy that directed it with him helped him. All his records were available to the public except the box of stuff about this thing. It's only been opened since they're both dead. So that's strange, isn't it? And yeah, there is another article I could read out where you hear more from Dean Stockwell and stuff from the personal diaries of people that worked on the film with him and that. And there's just more crazy stories about what went on. And the fact they did whipping parties as well. He sounds like people commented in the group as well. Like when we're talking about Dennis Hopper in the group, people were saying he seemed to be trying to have what he thought Manson had with a commune of women. And if you watch that American Dreamer, that is what it looks like. He's just got tons of girls living in that house with him. I think a lot of them are auditioning though for parts in his films because he was a filmmaker, was he? That's why they're there. You know, they're not just groupies. They're actually trying to audition. And like I say, I just transcribed that whole interview. That's crazy as well. During the interview, a woman walks in and starts playing the guitar really loudly, and he starts having a go at her, and they have an argument. And the interviewer just transcribes this into the interview. It's the most fucked up interview you've ever read in your life. It's really crazy. But yeah, I won't bother to read the whole thing out. But it's where there's parts where he talks about Charles Manson, obviously. So I could talk about that, and obviously he says about the Doyle incident, doesn't he? Yeah. Hopper just confirmed. Yeah, that article just said he did everything. He was doing acid. He was dropping peyote, which is mescaline, isn't it? Peyote is the purest form of mescaline, isn't it? He was dropping peyote buds with cans of cores. A guy nearly died on the set for taking five peyote buds at once. And yeah, there's more stuff about that woman getting tied to the porch and having a fire set under her, like Joan of Arc as well, and the whipping parties on this film. Yeah, I am feeling much better now. Thanks, actually. Yes, thank you for asking. I was rough last week. Sorry about last week. Yes, that was terrible. I couldn't even do an after show, could I? But yeah, I got it out anyway. I got that finished off. Like I say, this stuff about Dennis Hopper is just really crazy, isn't it? Sorry, what were you saying in the chat? There's some very strange stuff came out. There's so many points in that article that make you think, what? Yeah, and how the hell did Phil Spector end up fucking producing it as well? That's just bizarre, isn't it? And the fact that the character was originally going to be called Tex. Sorry, just seeing what people said in the chat while I was there. Oh no, my internet connection is not bloody dropping, is it? So it might go wrong with my internet connection, guys. If I freeze, I will be back. Yes, but it is bloody crazy. It's just a really, really strange story. And like I say, Schiller then going and making this documentary. That story about Schiller stood there filming an orgy and a guy walks in, and when he points the camera in his face, he freaks out, tells him he'll kill him, and throws the camera out the window and shit like that. It's crazy. Yeah, I was thinking today, reading about him, like though he does come across as a bit of a dick and a bit shallow and weird and that. You know, they say if you could have anyone at a dinner party, you could have three dinner guests, alive or dead. Who would you have? Yeah, Dennis Hopper would be one of them. He does. It does seem like an interesting bloke. Would have been an interesting dinner guest. Wouldn't want to marry him, but yeah, it'd be an interesting dinner guest. Mm. Yeah, but this is it. That's that American Dreamer. It's the post production. It's while he's editing the last movie, and Lawrence Schiller went and lived with him. That is what the American Dreamer is. Like I say, if you read to Reeve Whitson ages ago, someone screenshotted the guy in this film that looks like Reeve Whitson, and everyone was convinced it was Reeve Whitson, but we debunked it. There is a guy that looks like exactly like the picture of Reeve Whitson that's in Chaos, but it isn't him. It's been debunked. But yeah, that'll be, if you're into Manson research, that'll be how you've seen this film before. But it was actually directed by Lawrence Schiller, the same guy that wrote The Killing of Sharon Tate and was involved with the trial and getting out the fake story, basically. And so it's interesting that the next thing he does is go and publish an interview talking about the people at Cielo as well. So what did Susan Atkins tell him? Because he interviewed Susan Atkins for hours in jail. So who knows what Susan Atkins actually told Lawrence Schiller? Did Lawrence Schiller know about this stuff? Was it coming from him? Did Hopper hear it from him? That James Watson said the Phil Spector's wigs were released in the Hollywood Hills and are breeding profusely. Yeah. 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 Should make a mockumentary about the making of the last movie, yeah. But no, it exists. There is, but it's not the making of the film because it's after Michelle. He's talked about Michelle Phillips in it a few times and in that interview. And like I say, a lot of the stuff that's in that print interview is actually in the film as well. You hear him saying it in the film. So yeah, and if you want to see the transcript of that, you'd have to join the Facebook group or look at the subreddit because yeah, I've posted it on the subreddit, the transcription of that. If you couldn't read the picture, because we found a photo of the bloody interview from a listing for the magazine for sale, but it had been bought. Someone had already bought it, so we couldn't get the thing. But we only had this photo, and it's really difficult to read. And I managed to get it transcribed. So now we can read it, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's on subreddit. Yeah, Capone's just posted the subreddit. Yeah, and I've shared the film American Dreamer is on the subreddit and it's in my Facebook group. I watched it recently. And yeah, it is interesting. It's an interesting film. He's an interesting bloke. He does come across as very shallow though. Like when he talks about loving women and being in love with women, he's only ever talking about their beauty and their physical attributes. It's like he's got no interest in women's intellect or anything. Do you know what I mean? It's just like all very much a physical thing for him, excuse me. Oh god. Yeah, the weather's really hot here, so that makes allergies play up and all that, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh, and does everyone like the stream? If you're watching, hit like on the stream. It helps with the algorithm. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. Right, yeah. It's a great story about the last movie, but if you ever made your own movie and it doesn't connect, it can become the unending nightmare of your life. Oh, yeah. That's it. Yeah, I don't know if he did. he's not talked about it in that Hollywood interview, but yeah. Oh god, another friend of mine who's a big researcher and who finds a lot of stuff. The guy who found the actual Dennis Hopper interview is now reading lots of interviews about Dennis Hopper. In fact, apparently a Spanish language documentary is getting made about the last movie. And it's translated into Spanish. It's translated into English. It's where Dennis Hopper lost his poncho. And there's a Spanish-speaking guy making a movie about it as well. So I hope, that comes out and we can get it with subtitles or whatever, or overdubbed. So yeah, because it sounds like a lot of information about this was repressed until Dennis Hopper and the other director guy were dead. So we're going to hear more about it now. But yeah, this next article, if I do read it out, I think I will read it out, actually. Yeah, sod it. But this has dragged on a bit. There's more from Dean Stockwell. Lots more, Dean Stockwell's thoughts on the matter. And he, of course, is associated with the Manson case because there's been a rumour for years that he met Tex during the night somewhere. Not actually at the house, not actually at the Cielo Drive house, but yeah. That's how Dean Stockwell's connected to the Manson case. So he knew Tex as well. Yeah, yeah. From what he told me, he's literally gone to the town. He's gone to the town and he's interviewing the people in the town about the impact that the film had. Even all these years later, there must still be an impact. And yeah, that's the other crazy thing about this story, because the film sounds like it was meant to be showing how movie companies exploit towns and fuck up towns. And he went and did exactly that. That's the thing. When I get to reading this next article, it goes into more detail. A priest got defrocked and he messed up all the people. He got all the people taking drugs, and it really actually did fuck up the town. So the movie did exactly what, it was supposed to be protesting about, or whatever. Was it a protest though? Did he care? Did he even care? Was he just saying, this is life, this is what Hollywood does, sort of thing? It's a fucking strange film to make, and apparently he did exactly what he was like bemoaning. He wrecked this town to make that film. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, just looking at what people are saying for a second. Yeah, but it'd be interesting to hear more about it, won't it, from the point of view of the people that lived in the town where it was made. Oh, and also, Peru is really, really anti-LGBTQ, isn't it? And while he was out there, he made a statement to a reporter about homosexuals or something, and it caused them to restrict the freedom of the press in Peru permanently for everyone, because Dennis Hopper made one. Hear me? I don't know what happened, and the internet just dropped out, but the stream is still going, isn't it? Sorry about that. Yeah, the internet just dropped out entirely for some reason. Yeah, the ghost of Dennis Hopper must have got into the computer. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. Hopefully that wouldn't happen again. Because if that happens while I'm reading, I won't even know it's happened. So that'll be a pain in the ass. Right, yeah, I'll start reading this other article out because it'll take a while, and this stream's already been going on for nearly an hour. Sorry, gonna get it on the screen. A great title this one's got as well. An incredible assortment of freaks. The making of Dennis Hopper's The Last Movie. This one's a bit longer, but like I say, it goes into more detail, and there's more like extracts from people's diaries and everything. The journalist actually got access to people's diaries. It's really nice. Right, what the director of Easy Rider did next. Dennis Hopper would have been 78 tomorrow, May 17th. Sorry, I can't remember what year this was done. That seemed like a good reason to dust down this piece I wrote on the making of the last movie. Hopper's legendary unhinged follow-up to Easy Rider. The piece originally appeared in the uncut issue 158 as part of a survey we ran on the 50 greatest lost films. The last movie occupied the number one spot, and as far as I can tell, it's still unavailable to buy. At the time of writing, Hopper was still with us, and his friends and former co-stars on the film, among them actor Dean Stockwell, screenwriter Stuart Stern, filmmaker Henry Jaglom, who was kind enough to email me relevant pages from his diary, stunt coordinator Chuck Bale and Tony Basil, all spoke freely about their involvement with the film and shared their memories of working with Hopper. As you might expect, it is quite a story. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Writing in his private journal, in an entry dated January 23rd, 1970, the actor Henry Jaglom described a flight he once took from Hollywood to Peru. He was travelling with a storied company, including Peter Fonda, Dean Stockwell, Michelle Phillips, and Chris Christopherson, to shoot Dennis Hopper's new film, The Last Movie. The no smoking sign goes off aboard this APSA Peruvian Airlines 707, and joints are lit, Jaglom wrote. That's simple, 10 minutes into the air, and the cabin is a fog of marijuana smoke. Grass air everywhere, guitars and giggles. An incredible assortment of freaks are heading south with me to be in Dennis's film. At the time, Dennis Hopper was enjoying the extraordinary success of his directorial debut, Easy Rider, the film in which he also starred alongside Fonda, Jack Nicholson, and Phil Spector, making a fleeting appearance as a drug dealer. I didn't know that as well. Phil Spector was actually an Easy Rider. Had been made for $375,000, but its worldwide gross was a phenomenal $600 million. Hopper was suddenly hot property, and Hollywood now waited to see what he'd do next, especially those people who believed Easy Rider had been a fluke, and were convinced that Hopper, who already had a reputation for wildness, would fuck up, which of course he duly did. The last movie was inspired partly by Hopper's own experiences shooting the Sons of Katie Elder in Durango, Mexico in 1965. I thought, my God, what's going to happen when the movie leaves and the natives are left living in these Western sets? He told Village Voice. Hopper envisaged the last movie as an ambitious allegory about America and how it was destroying itself, a statement on capitalist greed, movie violence, and Hollywood colonialism. In 1965, he approached Stuart Stern, screenwriter on Rebel Without a Cause, to help with the screenplay. Together, they outlined a 98-page treatment at Stern's Hollywood home in Harold Way called The Last Movie, or Boohoo in Tinseltown. Dennis would stride back and forth in the room and we'd spitball ideas, remembers Stern today. I sat at the typewriter and he'd walk behind me with his joint and he'd be raving. Then he said, I bet you could really write if you had a little joint. And I said, well, I just won't do it. It makes me hallucinate, he said. There's something called a bong. You just inhale it over water. I had my snorkel and mask at home, so I put it on while I typed. And every time Dennis had some excess, he'd blow it down my snorkel. I was nearly as stoned as he was. Sorry, and it takes ages to skip the pages, huh? The story they came up with focused on a movie stuntman called Kansas, who was working on a western about Billy the Kid being filmed in Peru. When the actor playing Billy is killed in an accident, the crew returns home, but Kansas stays on, with the idea that he can attract other productions to the location. Meanwhile, the local Indians create movie equipment out of bamboo and reenact the shoot themselves as a religious ritual, including blood sacrifice. The following year, Hopper and Stern met with Phil Spector to persuade him to finance the film. A day of negotiations followed. As Stern remembers, Spector was a terrifying man, extremely wrapped up in himself. Dennis and his people would be in a room, and me and my people would be in the room. And we had caucuses, then our representatives would meet in a room with Spector. By the end of the day, Spector agreed to underwrite the research and the screenplay. Hopper and Stern returned to Harold Way and wrote a full 119-page screenplay in 3 days. Hopper originally wanted Montgomery Clift for the part of Kansas, but Clift died that July. According to Stern, Jason Robards almost committed to the role before Hopper decided he'd play the part himself. They planned to shoot in Mexico, but the authorities threatened to censor them. Then Hopper travelled to Peru, to Cusco, to visit Machu Picchu. It was there he got the vibrations. Back in LA, Spector withdrew his financial support for the last movie. Without a backer, the film went into hiatus for 3 years. Even with the success of Easy Rider behind them, Hopper found it difficult to get it made. BBS, who'd financed Easy Rider, balked when they learned Hopper wanted to star in the film and direct it. Warner's in Columbia passed too, but he eventually persuaded the newly founded youth division at Universal Pictures to bankroll the movie for $850,000. As part of the deal, Hopper would retain the final cut. With the film finally greenlit, Hopper travelled to Peru in late '69 to start pre-production. While in Lima, he was interviewed by a reporter from La Prensa, who asked him about marijuana and homosexuality. Taking a long reflective pull on an odd-looking cigarette, wrote Brad Darach in an on-set report for Life magazine, Dennis said he thought everybody should do his thing, and then allowed that he himself had lived with a lesbian and found it groovy. Within 24 hours, the government denounced the article and issued a decree repealing freedom of the press. The rest of the cast and crew reached town in January and took over the Hotel Cusco, an extremely elegant Victorian-age hotel, remembers Henry Jaglom. Coke was so plentiful in the region that, according to Tony Basil, who played Rose in the last movie's Film Within a Film, they served Coca tea in the hotel, just like little tea bags full of Coca tea, and you ordered it in the restaurant. Dirac claimed that within hours of the cast arriving in Cusco, a number of actors laid into a large supply of cocaine at bargain prices, $7 for a packet that cost $70 in the States. By 10 p.m, almost 30 members of the company were sniffing coke, or at least turned on with grass, acid, or speed. Of course, there was plenty of good cocaine, says Dean Stockwell, today, who played Billy the Kid. The natives there would happily give you leaves to chew on, and there was this little type of rock that's got certain minerals in it that precipitates the effect of the leaves, and they all chew it. That's what you call processed coke as well. I was aware of the amount of drugs being consumed out there. Yeah, oh yeah, but we kept ourselves apart from the leaves. But we kept to ourselves, apart from the leaves, which everyone was doing. We weren't stupid, we were just stoned. The scenes became wild, Derek reported. On whipping parties, an actor chained a girl to a porch and, inspired by the notion that she looked like Joan of Arc, lit a crackling fire at her feet. Another actor swallowed 5 peyote buds in 2 rapid succession and almost died. Suddenly you're 33 in Peru with a gang of guys who are living up to their reputations. Chris Christopherson, who also provided the film's opening song, Me and Bobby McGee. Didn't know that as well. That's where that song came from. I know it by Janis Joplin better than Chris Christopherson, but that was actually written for this film. Told Uncut in June 2002. In fact, what Hopper did was what he was filming. He was filming the corruption of a little town by the movie people, and I mean, they ruined this town. I think he got a priest defrocked. Looking back on the shoot in Uncut in February 2005, Hopper admitted it was one long sex and drugs orgy. Wherever you looked, there were naked people out of their fucking minds. But I wouldn't say it got in the way. It helped us get the movie done. We might have been drug addicts, but we were drug addicts with a work ethic. The drugs, the drink, the insane sex, they fueled our creativity. Each day, the crew made the 2-hour drive in a fleet of taxis to the location, a remote mountain village called Chinchero. There, Henry Yaglom remembers the rooms were horrifying. They were these terrible little rooms. Llamas could come through the door. They were shitting in the bathroom. Another problem was altitude sickness. Chinchero is 11,000 feet above sea level. Stockwell reckons 70 to 75% of the crew got sick. Stunt coordinator Chuck Bale recalls, I watched a cinematographer, Laszlo Kovac, walk up a little grade in the village, and when he got there, he fell flat on his face, didn't even put his hands out in front of him. The altitude got the better of Henry Yaglom, who left the film after 2 weeks. In a journal entry dated January 26, 1970, he wrote, My God, what a birthday. A llama in the kitchen, up at 6 a.m. after 2.5 hours sleep, body aches, chaos, can't eat breakfast, tea, raining, 2-hour drive to the location along an unpaved, unmarked, winding donkey track. I sit alone in a car while Peruvians try to dig me out. The shoot itself lasted for 7 weeks. Despite having the full script co-written by Stuart Stern, Hopper opted instead to improvise much of the film on location. Oh, I'm not afraid to start work with an empty head, he told Dirac. You can't create out of the moment. If you can't create out of the moment, you're not creating. He didn't even make up his mind what I was going to do until we got down there, says Stockwell. There wasn't a script. He'd outline it and then we'd go do it. But he was absolutely in control in his own inimitable way. All that time, he was a piece of work like nobody I've ever known. Dennis was all over the place. All constant energy. You just couldn't shut him up for a second. He had more energy than 10 people. He was awesome to be around. I call him an instinctive director, adds Chuck Bale. If he saw the sun going down, he'd yell at Laszlo Kovacs. They'd immediately set something up to get the sunset through a stained glass window. As things go, that's how he directs. He has a big plan in mind. Not everyone, however, was thrilled with the antics of a US film crew in the region. With an anonymous letter published in the Village Voice on December 24, 1970, one expat wrote, The absolute cultural insensitivity not only made me sick once again about my country and the fucked up rich citizens, but of course the government of Peru to crack down on long-haired tourists. The military have started mass shakedowns, roundups, detentions and drug busts. Back in America, Hopper began to work on editing the last movie, alternating between LA and his house in Taos, New Mexico. There were distractions. He was divorcing his first wife, actress Brooke Hayward, and dividing up his art collection as part of the settlement. Hopper's Taos home, meanwhile, had become a focal point for hangers-on, groupies and aspiring filmmakers. Lawrence Schiller, who directed The American Dreamer, a documentary shot while Hopper was editing the last movie, recalls Hopper living the life of his character out of Easy Rider, stoned all the time and carrying around an AK-47 or whatever. Dennis was fond of guns at the time, confirms Dean Stockwell, who visited Taos while Hopper was editing the last movie. Once in a while, he'd go up on the roof and fire off a couple of rounds into the sky. I don't know if Dennis ever shot at anybody. I remember 2 or 3 times inside the house he'd take a revolver out and shoot it at the ceiling. The editing itself proved to be a nightmare. Hopper had 40 hours of footage. He bought the tiny cinema in Taos and spent days screening the rushes for a team of 12 editors. Universal, meanwhile, were increasingly furious with his failure to deliver the film on schedule. The encounters were very heated, explains Schiller. He showed them just enough of the movie, in just enough of that right way to keep them at bay, and never until the very end, the entire movie. But he didn't know how the film was really going to work. Another guest at Teos during this time was filmmaker Alejandro Yordle, his name again, who recalls how strong the smell of Hopper's underarm perspiration was. One day, I think 10 women there, and I put everyone in a line for them to smell the perfume of Dennis Hopper, because he never changed his shirt for days upon days. Which sounds weird as hell, doesn't it? What made them all line up to sniff his armpits? Hopper invited Jodorowsky to help with the editing. At the time, he didn't know what to do with the last movie, says Jodorowsky. I saw the material and I thought it was a fantastic story. I was there for 2 days, and in 2 days I edited the film. Jodorowsky claims that Universal didn't like his cut and Hopper destroyed the print. Eventually, in late October 1970, Hopper sent for Stuart Stern to try to help him make sense of the movie. Stern was horrified by what he found. It took me 2 days just to look at the footage. Some of it was brilliant and some of it was awful, but the end of the film was not there. Stern stayed around long enough to attend Hopper's wedding to Michelle Phillips on October 31st. He got married reading the Gospel of St. Thomas aloud to Michelle, says Stern. He decorated the whole place with candles stuck in paper bags. It was a whole mixed mystical thing. He read the whole marriage ceremony, and it was just craziness. Just realize that's Halloween, isn't it? October 31st. They got married on Halloween. And then he spent the whole week screaming she was a witch. Right, last page. The last movie was finally made its debut at the 71 Venice Film Festival in August, where it won the Best Film Award before Universal released it in America on September 29th, 71, at New York's RKO 59th Street Twin Theatre, the same cinema in which Easy Rider had made its debut. Although the film broke the single-day box office record, the critical response was overwhelmingly negative. The New York Times Review, for instance, described it as an extravagant mess, indulgent, cruel, and thoughtless. Universal were horrified and demanded Hopper recut it. He refused, and the last movie was withdrawn within 2 weeks of its release. It died a quick death, Hopper told Uncut. My career never recovered. It was another 10 years before I had a chance to direct again. In 1987, Hopper and Stern had dinner together during a retrospective of Hopper's work at the Seattle Film Festival. They discussed the idea of remaking the last movie, with Hopper directing a younger actor, and this time using the original shooting script. But Hopper became too busy with other projects. The last movie enjoyed a brief US video release in March 1993 before disappearing again. Although there have been several promising rumours about a DVD issue, in a 2006 interview in Playboy, Hopper claimed he had acquired the rights from Universal and was planning to release it, while Prestige reissue label The Criterion Collection also investigated the possibility of issuing a special edition DVD, but nothing ever came of it. Today it seems like the only opportunity to see the last movie is at film festivals, where it often screens alongside The American Dreamer. With Hopper's health sadly in decline, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer on October 29, 2009. It's inevitably hard to predict what the future might hold for the film. Written off by many at the time as an unmitigated disaster, the last movie viewed today is a frequently dazzling experience. Certainly no other studio film from that period was as formally challenging. The movie's film within a film conceit, with Hopper coming in and out of character as Candace and its ongoing commentary on the filmmaking process, finds a more resonant echo in the work of Charlie Kaufman. Alex Cox's 1987 film Walker, about the 19th century American adventurer William Walker, who invaded Nicaragua in the 1850s, likewise adopted a non-traditional approach to filmmaking, including anachronisms like helicopters, and like Hopper, Cox was blacklisted as a director. If anything, the last movie was almost overwhelmed by the number of ideas Hopper throws at you. It's a Western, it's a statement on American expansionism, it's a satire on Hollywood. To audiences looking forward to more of the stoned hijinks of Easy Rider, it's no wonder the last movie left them confused. This was a far more audacious film than anyone could have anticipated. Arguably, the last movie sums up the artist Hopper wanted to be. Bold, out there, taking risks. It's a very personal film of Dennis's, agrees Dean Stockwell. It had some brilliant moments in it, and some brilliant vignette performances, says Stuart Stern. You couldn't dismiss it. The pageantry that he caught on film was so remarkable and so gorgeous. You have to account for that and give Dennis supreme credit for it. Right or wrong, Hopper told Uncut, that's what I wanted to do. There you go. So yeah, that gives you a bit more detail. And there was that about the expatriate wrote a letter saying that because of their behaviour, the government were clamping down on long-haired people, and so it caused a lot of trouble. And by the sound of things, like I've not really searched for interviews, but it doesn't sound like Hopper or the other filmmakers ever expressed any regret about that, or even said anything about that. You know, like did they even give a shit what they'd done? Did they know? Well, they obviously knew what they were doing, because that's what the film was about, wasn't it? You know. Yeah. Yeah, and that's bad. Yeah, it just jumps out at me there. He married Michelle Phillips on Halloween. Yeah. So I definitely want to see it, though. Like I say, when I was searching for the thumbnail image, it did say something about a Blu-ray. So I've got to search again. Maybe it has been released on DVD. Because, yeah, even if it is difficult to watch and doesn't make sense, it's culturally significant, isn't it? Because it's, you know, what he did after Easy Rider, isn't it? What Dennis Hopper did after Easy Rider. Have you read the interview? He talks about Orson Welles in that interview. He asked him about Orson Welles. They talk about how they break Orson Welles' heart and all that. The interview. I've transcribed it in the group. If you couldn't read the photo of it, he talks about Orson Welles. Yeah, and he knew Orson Welles apparently. Yeah, he talks about talking to Orson Welles. And like I say, that is on YouTube now, American Dreamer. If you want to watch it, it is interesting. Lots of footage of him. Yeah. I have heard, yes. Well, I've actually seen an interview. Someone showed me the interview where Michelle Phillips did admit that she did voodoo, but she stopped because she realised she was actually hurting people. And there's actually footage of her saying that. I saw it on YouTube in an interview. So, yeah, she did do voodoo, which is a form of witchcraft. And she said it was working as well, because she had to stop, because she realised she'd actually hurt people. Yeah. Right, yeah, this has been going over an hour now, hasn't it? But I'll chat a bit longer, though, just generally about Hopper and that. Give it a bit more of an outro. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm not going to read out the entire Hollywood Reporter interview, but I'll probably get around to reading out what he says specifically about Manson and going to visit Manson. And Lawrence Schiller set up Dennis Hopper going to visit Charles Manson in prison. And he talks about that in this interview that he gave to Lawrence Schiller for the Hollywood Reporter. Yeah, so Dennis Hopper visited Charles Manson in prison in the run-up to the trial. Yeah, it might be ahead of its time, or it might be bad, mediocre, or great. I would love to see it. Easy Rider is a masterpiece that holds up. Yeah, no, I don't see, because they talk about the cinematography. They say there was an amazing cinematographer. So even if there's no plot, just to see how it was filmed and how beautiful it looks, I want to see how, because that's what everyone says about it. The positive thing that comes out about it is it looked beautiful. I'd like to see that. And you see some clips of it in that An American Dreamer, but they're like outtake clips. But you see, Dennis Hopper doing some kind of death scene over and over again and shit like that. Yeah, in An American Dream, you just see little snippets of it. But yeah, I think it actually has been released on DVD now, or it said Blu-ray. The picture I used for the thumbnail, the title of that picture was Blu-ray, so I think it did get released. I'll look after this as soon as I finish the stream, because I would love to see it. And it is historically significant, isn't it? Because it's what he did after Easy Rider in cinema, whether it's bad or good. It's a reflection of what this drug and psychedelia-induced shit did to people, isn't it? It fucked up creative people. Yes, it made people make creative, good shit as well, but also it fucked up a lot of people and made a lot of films make no sense. Look at The Magic Christian. The Magic Christian was obviously written by people while stoned. You look at who wrote that script, right? As that film rolls, right? You look, bloody hell, that's the cream of our British comedy writers wrote that script. Fucking what the fuck was it though? When you actually watch the film, it's just like, what the hell is this? And all those great actors, so many great actors. Ringo Starr's in it, Peter Sellers in it. All of Monty Python appear in it practically, don't they? You know, fucking everyone. Hattie Jakes appears. All the best actors that we had were in that film. And it's absolutely rubbish. Oh, I know you're a troll. Or is it just a coincidence you called Michelle Phillips? Oh, you enjoyed it though. Jolly good. Is it really just a coincidence? Are you not taking the piss? Thank you for enjoying the shows, and yeah, welcome to new people. If there's new people who haven't been to the streams before, like I say, new subscribers, you have to watch the full sequence of events stuff. That was my big thing that I started doing, was trying to get people to see that it was more than just Cielo Drive and TLB. The Manson family killed people before and after. And once you see the full sequence of events, it becomes much more clear that this was something to do with drug dealing in some way. You know, I mean, like, all these murders had some kind of connection to drug dealing. The LaBiancas, it's a bit more up in the air because there isn't a solid connection there. But it's the Cielo Drive lot and Gary Hinman and all that, all these people, Bernard Crowe, all these people were to do with drug dealing. And it's just, it becomes very clear once you see the whole thing. Yeah, I'll do an after show tonight. Yeah, I was just to give this a bit of an outro. I won't end it straight away, but yeah, I'll end it in a minute and then I'll come back and do an after show. Yeah, I want to get that out. And next week, I'm probably going to talk about Paul Krasner, because we're just getting into looking into the sources for the rumors, like, because the sources are a bit tenuous, and this Dennis Hopper thing becomes tenuous once you realise it was Lawrence Schiller who got him to say that, basically, and who took him to visit Charles Manson and got him to talk to Manson and say stuff about Manson in an interview and that. So it does just look like some kind of, was he trying to further promote his book or something? Who knows? But he has apparently, he distances himself from the killing of Sharon Tate now. Well, let me find his website. It'll take me a second, sorry. Give me a second, but I'll find his website because it shows every book he's written, but the killing of Sharon Tate is not mentioned. And he definitely is the same guy that wrote it. Sorry, it'll take me a second to find it, so I've got to search in my Facebook group for it. Right, sorry about that. Right, so this is his website. I won't bother to read it out, but this is the guy. This is the guy that filmed American Dreamer. We just heard about him filming the orgy and refusing to stop filming a guy, and the guy freaked out and threw him out of the video. So this is the kind of stuff he did. And yeah, he was involved with all sorts of stuff. And look at his work, book publishing. No, The Killing of Sharon Tate, though. See, all those years. 1969, he would have been early 1970. He published The Killing of Sharon Tate too. Right, but he does not mention that on his website. Isn't that interesting? That he's distancing himself from writing that book. Yeah, oh, night, Dawn. Have you got to go? Sorry about that. Yeah, me taking so long to find out. I should have just Googled it straight away. It was the first thing that came up when you Google his name. But yeah. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll end this now and I'll come back and do an after show in a couple of minutes. So yeah, stick around and watch for the notification if you want to do an after show. And yeah, thanks for coming. And I'll see you next week. Like I say, it will probably be more talking about Paul Krasner, because we want to talk about these different sources for these rumors and how reliable are they and all that sort of thing. So yes, anyway, see you next week or in 5 minutes if you want to do the after show. Good night.